This is Sybert signing into Red Alert 3 on the map Snowplow and into the year 2010 for an SVE for the ages, or perhaps just from the ages. Going refinery first into a war factory. I guess it'll be a bold strategy, and let's see how it works out for the Cyan Soviets in the north. This is Baskin Robbins. Meanwhile, in the south, going for a much more standard opener, double refinery. This is Stealth Guardian. The year is 2010. Red Alert 3 just surpassed by Tib Twilight as the newest Command & Conquer game, or at least newest one with multiplayer, since I guess Uprising came out in between them. But no multiplayer for Uprising. Engineer on the left side, Sickles in the middle of the map, and it's Snowplow. So that is the one thing that will unite this more than 10-year gap between these games. Red Alert 3 ladder map pool has been very consistent over the time of its release. People like the ladder maps and they stick with them. And we are going to be checking out games from 2010 all the way to late 2024 as the Sickles jump in on top of that harvester, but only one makes it inside of the harvester cage, and now it is going to be a race of the health bars as that one Sickle stands alone against the harvester. The second harvester does pull out its guns, but it gets stuck on the ore node, and it's going to be a harvester victory on the right side, but without the ability to return fire. It'll be a Sickle victory on the left side, straight to tier 2 on that mecha bay. So that is now a pretty expensive target, but Tsunami tanks and Chopper VXs are both viable options now for the Empire player. Second war factory comes up, or second refinery comes up rather, for the Soviet, and it's straight into a super reactor. Not the fastest possible, but still pretty darn quick. And it will also be no barracks for the Soviet player. So the oil derrick on the right side is completely unopposed. I think the barracks is over there for the Empire player, who is a little bit dizzy given this opening, the Sickles right down the middle of the map that he was not prepared for. But now Baskin Robbins has found himself with his own tech switch that he needs to respond to. Chopper VXs will get blasted by those bullfrogs. One bullfrog will go down, but two Chopper VXs get eliminated. The crash down does land on top of one of those bullfrogs, and the bullfrogs could have pursued that, gone for the kill, and hoped to eliminate it, but instead the MCV gets called back, and so do the bullfrogs away from the front line, and both players will take a little bit of a break. No Crusher Crane on the north side means no quick expansion and no heal up for these bullfrogs. So it will be just two half-health bullfrogs smoking away in the main base of Baskin Robbins. As I said, this game is from 2010, and we are going to be going all the way up to the year 2024 with a couple of games in the years in between. We'll get to see how Red Alert 3 has and has not changed. And as I alluded to, one of the things that hasn't really changed much is the map selection. The original 7 ladder maps are still the most commonly played maps online and in tournaments as well. Those 7 maps set the stage for competitive Red Alert 3 for pretty much the entirety of its life, from 2008 all the way to the modern day. And of course, there are lots of other community and custom-made maps, but despite that, there is still a preference for the original 7 that you would play in auto match back in the day. Barracks finally comes up. A little bit late, but a 5-minute barracks timing for this Soviet player. Definitely not your typical build. And even though the game is from, the replay is from 2010, it's still having trouble loading apparently, as the game just locked up. As you can see, it says receiving data. Normally that only happens when you fast forward, but the game just couldn't keep up with the insane action of the moment. Couple of Chopper VXs, couple of Tsunami tanks moving out onto the map for Stealth Guardian. A 3 refinery setup for the Soviet player, but double oil derrick on the Empire side. Does mean that the income is fairly even. Baskin-Robbins does have the advantage with the 3rd refinery. However, the total resources gathered was previously in favor of Stealth Guardian. Baskin-Robbins now up at 18k, just about 2k in an advantage over Stealth Guardian. However, that 3 refinery advantage may be about to disappear because a true stealthy attack, unknown and unseen by the Soviet player, comes in. A couple of Tsunami tanks, but no Tegus to clean up those Tesla troopers, so this will buy a lot of time. That 1 Tesla trooper getting slowly chunked away at will buy a lot of time for any kind of a response, I guess. And there's not much happening from Baskin-Robbins as he decides to just hang out here with his tanks over on the right side and trade out the pretty expensive Tesla troopers one at a time. He will get himself a little bit of cash back here, and he will take down perhaps one of these Tsunami tanks, get the lockdown, and get the kill. Nope, doesn't actually get the lockdown, doesn't even need it as the Chopper VX gets eliminated as well. Trading out Tsunami tanks, Chopper VXs for a couple of Tesla troopers, and now they are going for the kill on the bridge. But I think he got the focus fire wrong because it doesn't appear to be damaging any of the bridge segments anywhere, which does mean the bridge will stay up. That ground attack path will remain open, but the refinery has survived. No damage on that refinery, no significant damage on that refinery, as the ore refinery out on the water, refinery number 4 for the Soviet player, comes up and online. And now the Empire player's economy is truly going to be outmatched. Stealth Guardian is at about 4k per minute, but Baskin-Robbins up at about 4.7k per minute. And that is nice as the Soviet player, especially when the Empire player is not being particularly efficient. Sometimes the Soviet player has to have an economic advantage, a little bit like Zerg in StarCraft 2. They have to have a bigger economy for most of the game because they produce and throw away more units. And that can also be true of the Soviet players. However, this is not a particularly efficient Empire player, so I'm not so sure that the better economy for the Soviet players really being matched by the high efficiency of the Empire units. Is this just going to be a base trade? They do know about the army of the other player, and there is, of course, an MCV out on the water, pretty safe away from this attack. Terror Drone does get the infect on one of these Tsunami tanks, but there are plenty more Tsunami tanks to go around. Fight breaking out in the south, the Tsunami tanks in the north, chewing through pretty much the entirety of that war factory, but the Terror Drone getting a 3rd infect on a 3rd Tsunami tank, going to be forcing the force fire as the Tsunami tanks drive right into the toxins and right through the toxins to emerge on the other side relatively unscathed. Super Reactor the next target, as it is going to be double flak or double Tesla coil coming in at the water expansion to keep these Tsunami tanks away from the prize. Super Reactor getting targeted, and it will go down. Breaks down a couple of walls, hands over a fully heroic status to one of those Tsunami tanks, and now the refinery is under threat. The MCV not going to be rebuilding walls or placing any kind of defenses. It is going to be just a full-on base loss by those Tsunami tanks. Everything else in the south gets eliminated. Guns getting added to these hammer tanks, and now they are chewing through that Tier 2 war factory. Tier 2 going to be fully reset for both players. Of course, the Super Reactor can be restarted out there on the water a bit more easily than rebuilding your war factory as the Empire player. And meanwhile, barracks on the left side, but this might have been an MCV cell from the Empire player. just foregoing any chance of the rebuild, losing the War Factory, selling the MCV, and hoping that these Imperial Warriors can cross one of the remaining bridges to the other side of the map and bring down that Soviet player on land. Tsunami tanks are going for the kill out on the water. The MCV getting chunked in low power mode means that these base defenses do nothing at all. I mean, you could at the very least try to sell off the flak cannon and get just a regular reactor instead of going for the super reactor, but it is not meant to be. The MCV goes down, and whatever was building over there, a crusher crane, gets canceled. It is going to be a full-on base race, and one player is only on land, but the other player is out on the water as well. Nothing of merit being kept out on the water. It does mean that it's 2 buildings left for each, a barracks and a refinery in the north versus 2 barracks kind of in the south. Engineer comes out, and the Imperial Warriors are going to be crossing the bridge. The Tesla Troopers had not been given the order to kill the bridge. They might have been able to kill it in time with the help of the Flak Trooper throwing those anti-personnel mines. But in this case, it is going to be the Tesla Troopers targeted down and eliminated. Double heroic status handed over to 2 of those Imperial Warriors, and it's going to be a fight with the bear. The bear could get off an amazing roar as all of the Imperial Warriors are facing the wrong way. Almost every single one of them gets locked down, frozen in place as the tsunami tanks roll up. They need to deal with that barracks, although there isn't much that can be produced with such a low tech level. The bridge collapses once again. The tsunami tanks and the Imperial Warriors going to be joining forces to cut down the refinery, to shut down that barracks, and the hammer tanks can't cross the map in time. Baskin Robbins has been defeated. He will drop the game here in 2010, but he gets an opportunity to redeem himself, and we're off to Fire Island. No more Empire here, but we do still have playing the Soviets, this time choosing purple and definitely going for a different build. This is Baskin Robin, just rolling as Baskin in this game. Meanwhile, in the south, going airfield first, not looking to contest those infantry units. This is Terror Drone Not OP. All the way back in 2014, that guy was still rolling around, and a somewhat familiar face. I'm trying to remember if Terror Drone Not OP is also known as Awesome A, or if that is someone else. I'm not 100% sure, but Terror Drone Not OP is definitely a name that I recognize. Engineer does not make it to the oil derrick. And Terror Drone Not OP, or maybe is there also a player known as Terror Drone is OP? Because now I'm actually a little bit confused. I might be thinking of 2 different players and getting them a little bit mixed up. Conscripts getting sniped. Double Vindicator does mean that this was quite a lot of cash dumped right from the beginning for the Allied player, but it's quite a lot of cash dumped right at the beginning for the Soviet player as well. The Engineer, the double barracks, the constant conscript production. Yeah, conscripts are cheap, but when you're getting 20 of them, that does add up. And of course, in this case, they're just getting sniped by some very solid Vindicator bomb micro. Nice stop commands there that I always manage to mess up. And of course, if the game has a little bit of lag, if the online match has some latency, then getting that stop micro just right takes a little bit of practice. But in this case, it is very consistent. So Terror Drone Not OP managing to keep it consistent with that bomb splitting, killing off as many conscripts as possible. But the Molotov cocktails have started flying, and now with a 3rd Vindicator, I imagine most of these conscripts will get cleaned up before very much has been done to this airfield. 2, maybe 3 conscripts are left here on the front line, with a couple more crossing the map, and it's mostly going to be the Bears looking to split off, block some refineries, be annoying, and force more bombs to come out from those Vindicators. Conscripts have all been cleaned up. 3rd refinery comes up before the super reactor, so a very distinct difference. 2010, it's one refinery into a war factory, sickles, terror drones, going for the aggressive play on Snowplow. Here, 2014, things have changed a little bit for Baskin. We've got ourselves triple refinery before the super reactor, and of course Fire Island with the double barracks opening. That's a lot more of a common thing. Snowplow, you can sometimes get away with those aggressive plays across the middle of the map. But in this case, it is going to be a very different opening and a huge delay to the War Factory. We're climbing up towards the 4-minute mark before the War Factory will even be started. As the MCV packs up and is on the move, it's right into the airfield, as a MiG or two could go a big way to changing the fortunes of the Soviet player. One Apollo. Of course, we can always get a second airfield out from our allied player, add on a couple of more Apollos, especially when he scouts across the map and sees, hey, that's 2 MiGs just waiting for me, as that is no war factory in sight. No 4th refinery either out on the water. Instead, Baskin goes across the map. There's not a crusher crane to start up a Tesla coil immediately, so it will have to be the MCV. With this engineer nearby, it could be a dangerous proposition to stop for very long. Twin Blade should be crossing the map. No, it's 3 MiGs. He didn't go for a Twin Blade after, and 1 wall segment coming up, but he's going to have to cancel that as the engineer is already here. He can get the crush perhaps, but the laser lock is going to be the next thing that he has to worry about, and the Vindicators are probably refueled. They can even sacrifice themselves if they have to drop those bombs and quickly get back to the airfield. The MCV down to about half health. This is an ill-advised strat coming out from Baskin Robin. It is very different to what he did in game number 1. Good body block from that barracks. Going to be keeping those Javs away from the MCV for now and making them run a little bit further to get to those air units as well. 1 harvester down, but with 2 fresh refineries at the natural expansion, it's going to be pretty easy for this allied player to keep his economy rolling. He's also got the oil derrick under his control, but for now, all of his units are just getting jumped on by those Twin Blades. And fortunately for Baskin, the multi-gunner turret goes for the bears on the ground, not the weakened Twin Blade that was in the sky just above that multi-gunner turret. A second harvester gets eliminated. If a refinery goes down, then that goes a long way towards evening up the economic situation. But for now, the allied player is pretty okay. Barracks is useful, Javs are useful. The tools that get created for defense are also useful in offense. And yeah, this may not be the ideal build that the allied player was going for, but it's a lot better than having your MCV on the wrong side of the map. The War Factory will finally get deployed back in the north. The advantage of the Soviet build radius, allowing the MCV to be on the south corner of the map, right in the middle on that little plateau, and instead building a war factory all the way back at home. Hammer tanks now available, terror drones, sickles, bullfrogs as well to help deal with that allied aircraft. Harvester does go down, $250 of cash back heading into the pockets of that Soviet player, and a fresh refinery on the southern half of the map as well. Baskin drops the toxins on the barracks, stopping any future Jav production, at least for a moment. MiGs fly over, Twin Blade in kind of a weird position. You could definitely go and attack it from this side, and then you're not even close to the allied anti-air, which can just skirt out into the middle of the map and go for the kill on that Twin Blade. The IFVs do massive damage to air units, and the Twin Blade will crash down, but miss the damage onto the oil derrick. No engineers from the Soviet player, but the barracks is back up and running. What is he doing? He's actually taking a 4th refinery from his opponent's base, and for now, Terratron not OP is just letting it happen. This is what you get when you span more than 10 years of Red Alert 3. It may not be the highest level play, but it is the goofiest and the entertainment-iest level of play. Multi-gunner IFV with the sniper attachment, an engineer packed along as well. And we'll see what the plan is here for Terror Drone, not OP. He's heading right into the heart of the Soviet base. The engineer pops out, but nothing else. Is it going to be the super reactor, or it's going to be the war factory as the hammer tank goes for the crush, but the cell still happens, and that's a spy jumping inside of the super reactor, and no power for a minute for the Soviet player. Hammer tanks showing up on the south side, Tesla troopers as well. You better keep those Guardians back or they'll get locked down by the Tessos. It's going to be a multi-gunner turret and a chrono blast coming in from on high. The Tesla troopers not able to close the distance. They can be locking down these tanks, but they're just not going for it. Bullfrog stepping forward onto the front line, and the hammer tank goes down, perhaps to the Peacekeepers, but everything else goes down to the Tesla troopers as the Peacekeepers getting distracted by the Bullfrog instead of just cutting down those Tesla troopers. They don't have the numbers as the hammer tank moves in for the crush. One Tesla trooper survives the fight. They may have suits of metal that seem like they would be armor, good to stop shotgun blasts, but those Peacekeepers are just so efficient at killing Tesla troopers most of the time. Low power might be the name of the game as Baskin Robbins comes back online, and Terror Drone not OP. Well, he doesn't have to worry about terror drones as the change in strat leads to a change in outcome. I don't know if that was so much of a turret push coming out from Baskin as it ended up just becoming a MCV proxy base on the other side of the map. Not even really effective Tesla coil pushing. It just ended up turning into a new base, expanded into his opponent's main as that wraps up 2014, and it sends us into the future. And it takes us to Infinity Isle. Finally, we are here. Infinity Isle has been achieved throughout the ages, and we're kicking it off on the left side, playing the Yellow Soviets. This is Baskin, all the way here in the great past 10 years ago, playing Red Alert 3. Meanwhile, on the right side, as the Red Soviets, it's Foxtonian, which I do seem to remember a Soviet player with some kind of a Fox. I know Aeonian was also a Command & Conquer player. Foxtonian, I feel like there was a different Fox player who's fairly well known, but the name escapes me. So perhaps this is the same Foxy Red Alert 3 player, or perhaps it is someone else. The walls have returned. Is this going to be Super Reactor on Infinity Isle? It does seem we had those kind of big walls on Snowplow where the reactor was like to the side and then there were additional walls. It's War Factory into the super reactor here. Skip the barracks once again for Baskin. So he did the same thing on Snowplow. Of course, Fire Island was a very different build, but now we're back to something that's a little bit more similar to Fire Island or to Snowplow. Sickle Jump comes in. Terror Drone going to be going for the lockdown, but the Terror Drone will escape for now. Of course, it's 3 Sickles versus 2, so we'll see if the Terror Drone and the Conscript can make the difference. Good focus firing from Baskin. Will be able to knock down one Sickle. The second one trying to escape. It's going to be close, but he will not manage to escape. But the Terror Drone does get the infect, and the second Terror Drone is going to be able to lock down. The Micro isn't perfect, but it is going to be good enough as the Flak Trooper's now able to get in some damage as well. Double Sickle goes down, but it's going to be a trade of the Sickles. Basically 1-for-1 in the extended fight for Baskin and Foxtonian. I think it was 3-for-3 in total, but slowly they chipped away at each other with these Sickles. A little bit more health off of that Sickle there. Foxtonian finding maybe a stabilizing footstep. It's right into an airfield as well. This is a super fast air build from Baskin. Not something that I would expect, and I don't know, an air rush build, maybe it does have some kind of viability. I'm not sure if we're going to be seeing a resurgence of this coming here in the modern day 2025 Red Alert 3, but perhaps the air rush is a good strat. And when you've been focusing so much on sickle engagements on these cheaper, low-tech units, you're not focusing on bullfrogs at all. You're not playing an allied player. Why would you be going for bullfrogs? You're going for terror drones and infantry and sickles. You're not going for a bunch of anti-air. So a couple of twin blades out on the map. They can start harassing harvesters perhaps, but of course bullfrogs, I imagine, started producing immediately after those twin blades were spotted. One twin blade is pretty low on health, down to about 50%, and the bullfrogs are in good position, but no need to throw away those twin blades. Just recall them back to the Baskin side of the map and wait for another opportunity. Third refineries coming up for both players. A distinct difference in quality of play coming out from Baskin. 5 years after that first snowplow game, it seems like things have improved in his quality of play. And we've gotten to see a different opponent every single time, but also a different faction every single time. And I feel like Baskin has smoothed out a lot of rough edges that we saw in his snowplow game. His army is a lot more active, his decision-making is a lot quicker, and now the switch into the twin blades and now into the terror drones, this perfect little like 1-2 punch. Not expecting the sickle though, so it will be the twin blades pumping away at that ore collector. Not going to be able to do a ton of damage because the bullfrogs are here, and with no crusher crane, these twin blades take hull damage that is not easily repaired. I imagine we will be seeing a crusher crane eventually, but good impact by that terror drone, forcing the kill of the bullfrog, and they get the terror drone as well. Sometimes the timing is just not quite right, and the terror drone ends up getting that last tick of damage to kill the unit in between the attack animations of the units that are doing a bit of friendly fire. And so if the unit gets killed by something other than the terror drone dies as well. Whereas if the terror drone is the thing that gets the last tick of damage, then the terror drone will survive and can infect another unit. And sometimes when you're force firing your own units to kill the terror drone, the timing does not work out, and you end up, the terror drone ends up getting that last tick of damage and surviving, and then infecting another unit. So you've just aided it in its cause. You've made it a little bit quicker instead of being a little bit slower. Classic 6-minute barracks coming up from Baskin. We all know the 6-minute barracks build. It's a classic that you bust out on ladder from time to time. But he will finally get that oil derrick. So the much earlier capture of the oil derrick has yielded a couple of thousand extra credits into the bank account of Foxtonian. And we can't necessarily see that reflected because it was a faster third refinery from Baskin. So Baskin does actually lead the total resources gathered, but just barely. However, now with 4 refineries and an oil derrick, Baskin is going to have a comfortable 500 to 1,000 credit lead over his opponent. Harvester takes a little bit of damage there from the falling satellites, but when one Soviet player has some falling satellites, that usually means the other player also will have some falling satellites coming very soon after. Molotov cocktails going to be forcing the flak troopers to abandon their location. One hammer tank goes down, one MiG goes down. Some nice catches for Baskin, managing to chip away at the army of his opponent. Both players have gone for the battle lab, so the tech advantage might slightly be on the side of Foxtonian, who actually has those Tier 3 units already produced and on the front line, whereas Baskin has got the Tier 3 access, but no Tier 3 units on the ground at least. It could be a Kirov on the way from the airfield, but the V4s are already out for the Red Soviet player. Hammer tanks pushing forward. It's going to be an APOC tank on the front line as well. Snipe comes out from Natasha to take down one hammer tank, and the satellites come down, but they miss Natasha, and they miss pretty much everything else. It's going to be a magnetic harpoon as everything else gets the kill, and the hammer tank gets claimed by Foxtonian. So you better hope there's something coming out. It is going to be a Kirov. It is going to be that big, heavy aircraft, and hopefully the delay tactic will work well enough. Sickle goes down, but the Tesla coil is going to be the target on the other side. APOC tank going to be stepping forward. Natasha sniping one of the terror drones, and the rest of the army just isn't very strong, and there isn't a huge incentive for Foxtonian to just throw his units away. He's got the magnetic harpoon. He's got the V4s. He can just pummel away at this army, slowly bringing the engagement. But finally, the APOC tank gets targeted. It doesn't dodge the missiles, and now he can move forward as Baskin gets the kill before the reinforcements show up. The magnetic harpoon will allow these units to, force these units into the engagement rather than allowing them to escape. As the Kirov comes in, Baskin reveals that there is another element to this plan, and the magnetic harpoon's going to be locking these APOC tanks in place, but that means the player with the V4s will get the victory unless the Kirov can save the day, as the V4s are already in the route, and the Kirov finishes off the APOC tank before he can actually escape. Double APOC tank moving forward. Magnetic harpoons can find their mark, but once again, it's just locking these APOC tanks in place, allowing the V4s to get the guaranteed damage. As it is going to be 2v1. The Kirov has to be the difference maker. The MiG coming in, and the Bullfrog counterplay, as it is desperation from both of these players down to the last few units. The Kirov difficult to deal with, and the APOC tank so low on health that they get cleaned up. The rush to airfield is paying off in massive entertainment value coming from this Kirov. But what is the play for Baskin after this? The Bullfrog is down, the Kirov is exposed, the terror drone locked down, and the MiGs pummeling away at that Kirov. The MCV under threat, and Foxtonian getting some critical damage done. V4 step onto the front line, and it's going to be an MCV snipe. You hope you've got something nearby to get the capture. It's going to be Natasha hoping to survive the terror drone. She goes for the snipe on Natasha, instead fails both, and it's not going to be a Natasha one tap. It's instead going to be an APOC tank going for the kill. The terror drone doesn't go for the lockdown, but it's going to be MiGs on both sides. There's the lockdown, and there's the Natasha laser coming in. An unfortunate fight for Baskin will mean that this game in 2015, I guess it's technically not over, but it would be a pretty amazing comeback. This is where, if the Kirov hadn't been revealed, it could be cutting through the rest of this base, taking down the airfield, taking down the main base, and sort of transform this into a base race, as opposed to Foxtonian just going to be slowly eliminating Baskin. I'm not sure that there is much that Baskin can even do at this point. He's lost his tier 3. He's still got his tier 2. He can rebuild an MCV, so hope springs eternal, I suppose. Natasha does actually end up getting sniped, and the V4s are terrible at killing sickles. The Bullfrog as well. As long as the sickle can stay away from the magnetic harpoon, then it can kill the rest of this army. But there's now 2 APOC tanks, which means 2 magnetic harpoons, which means 2 dead sickles. The one thing that you have to avoid with an army like this. But with more and more APOC tanks crossing the map, it gets harder and harder to fleet jump away from them. Terror drones coming out. He will get the infect on the Bullfrog, but I'm not sure what else can really be done. Even if you infect all of the units, that just delays the inevitable. It doesn't save you from the end of the game. And with only an airfield left, it would have to be a full reset on the air power of his opponent, which MiGs are not likely to go down to terror drones. Bullfrogs even trying to kite away from those twin blades, delay their kills as long as possible, and that will do it. The super reactor goes down, and the game is lost as Baskin pulls out the sneaky tactics, but in the end is not able to pull out the win. Foxtonian manages to secure the victory with some very solid ground play. Slow, steady, and methodical with some critical Natasha snipes as well. Baskin moves forward into the future. And that sends us all the way to the year 2024. On to industrial strength and playing as the purple in the north. This is Baskin. Barracks into refinery, mixing it up for a new decade that dawns here in the 2020s. In the south, playing the orange, this is a line. Orange and allies. So we get to see another player, and we're returning to an SVA. We'll see if it's another turret push, if it's another Tesla coil push, which can work on this map. I mean, it's multi-gunner turret pushes might work a little bit better, but Tesla coil pushes are definitely possible, and it can make the game very awkward, forcing your opponent usually out onto the water, having to abandon their main base. But it is not shaping up that way. We do have the super reactor with just the barracks to anchor this army, to anchor Baskin in this game. Dogs and bears going to be coming in. Good roar comes off, but a better bark comes out from the dog, locking down all three of the bears and allowing the peacekeepers to move on forward. They're going to have to trade out versus the conscripts, and the conscripts are mostly happy to engage in some building trading with... He accidentally just burned out his own building with the conscripts because he thought the peacekeepers were going to take the building, but they ended up not quite doing it. It will be costly for the allied player to clear out these buildings one after the other for double the price that it takes the Soviet player to hold them. This is still a lot of peacekeepers, a lot of cash dumped out by both players right in the beginning, but more dumped out by a line. Although if he keeps producing bears and conscripts, then Baskin is going to catch up in the total resources spent for this opening. Bears get a magnificent roar off, cleaning up every single one of those peacekeepers. That was 8 or 10 peacekeepers there going down in quite a little cluster, so $2 grand almost worth of peacekeepers, depending on how many it actually ended up being. Conscripts now going to be closing the distance with some of these peacekeepers. Vindicators coming out, going for the bombing runs. It may be into a super reactor, but it's going to be also into a third refinery for Baskin. So no quick third refinery from our allied player. He's more concerned with microing his peacekeepers out in the middle of the map and keeping his Vindicators bombing down his opponent's forces before that third refinery gets started. Perhaps a little bit of an economic advantage here for Baskin, but the fact that a line has the oil derrick and also has the Vindicators to keep up the bombing runs means that as the third refinery comes online, a line is going to have that economic advantage back under his control. The power of the oil derrick is certainly nice to give you that extra little bit of edge. And of course, with how efficient you can be with Vindicators, it is also a relatively easy way to make up the difference in economy, is just keep those Vindicators alive, keep their bombing runs active. No airfield. I thought, given the fact that it's 4 Vindicators out for the allied player, that Baskin would be going for a couple of MiGs. 1 Vindicator goes down. 2 Vindicators did go down, actually. Okay, no. Maybe? Alright. 3 Vindicators survived the bombing run. A couple of bullfrogs ended up getting eliminated, and it's going to be the conscripts going for the kill on the oil derrick as well, trying to eliminate that advantage. Peacekeepers once again getting cut down in pretty healthy numbers. These Vindicators, I mean, they should have gone for the bombing run on the barracks, given how much cash was actually wasted in sending Peacekeepers in those 2 waves of attack. Vindicators going to be splitting their bombs. They get both of the Bullfrogs, and this time all 4 Vindicators survive. So the 5 refinery economy of Baskin, it's powering up, but his land army is not growing. Having to rebuild those same Bullfrogs again and again is not a good way to get your army powered up and ready to rock and roll across the map. Airfield, I imagine, will be the follow-up after refinery number 5 gets settled. It has to be into an airfield. We need some MiGs. We need some more anti-air options other than just the Bullfrog. Reactor does go down. That does kind of eliminate, make some annoying things happen in terms of your build queue. He canceled the 5th refinery. I don't think Align actually realized that's what he was doing. But when you snipe the one single reactor, this is one of those things that can happen with Soviet players, because a lot of them do go... Oh, I love the bomb split on the walls as well. Just, you either force your opponent to rebuild it, or they have that weakness, they have that opening in their armor around their refinery for the rest of the game. You can potentially slip in some jabs or an IFV or some other ground units a little bit later in the game. But because Soviet players are often so focused on getting that super reactor up nice and early, yeah, what do you want to do? Do you want to die on the ground or die in the sky? 3 Vindicators go down. A great move there by Baskin, dropping the satellites with 4 Bullfrogs there to camp the airfield as well. Perfect moves coming out from both of these players, both playing extremely well in terms of decision making. That was a great exchange. The combination with the sniping the reactor and also this satellite drop with the Bullfrogs to force your opponent into a bad situation. The ground army has been pretty thin on both sides, but do not be deceived. A Riptide can be a powerful thing because the javelins that are packed along inside of it. The second command needs to be given, but of course, Baskin is creating problems on the other side of the map. Malign going to be losing out the opportunity to damage that refinery quickly. He still hasn't started laser locking it down on the other side of the map. He's going to be losing his airfield. He's going to have to rebuild that somewhere else, but he is up to tier 2, and he is finally sniping that refinery. So the main base refinery gets eliminated, and those jabs have found the weakness that they were looking for. Fortunately, Baskin has 2 fresh refineries out there on the water, and it is not into an airfield. It is instead into the battle lab, the tier 3 unlock coming in for Baskin as Align has taken the garage in the middle of the map. Hammer tanks coming in, but it's going to be a cryo shot on top of the Bullfrogs. 1 conscript will get caught there, and that is not much of a catch for a cryo shot, but at least it forced that Bullfrog into a bad situation where he could be caught and killed. Meanwhile, it's going to be 4 Riptides on the north side of the map as the battle wages in the main base of Align 95. IFVs are not much of a match for the Hammer tanks, but the Guardian tanks are a better fit for that bill. IFV is putting out decent damage when the targeting laser is activated by the Guardians, but again, the Hammer tanks are the better unit in this fight. That 1 conscript frozen in place and still here to throw his Molotov cocktails against that power plant. The Tesla coil is a difficult thing for Riptides to fight against, and with no micro, those Riptides just go down. A Hammer tank gets frozen or gets shrunk as the cryocopter comes in onto the high ground, staying away from the Bullfrogs, but the Guardian tanks now surrounded by 4 Hammer tanks are just giving their guns away. The Shrink comes in, but can the Crush finally find the kill? No! The Hammer tank goes down, but so does the Guardian. It's a double Guardian kill as the Bullfrog can now get some damage out onto the cryocopter, forcing it away down below half health, and the Shrink comes out onto the Hammer tank, but there's nothing here to crush it. The Peacekeeper will be able to get some good chunks on that damage. A second cryocopter shows up for the allied player, but there's just nothing on the ground. The Peacekeeper came from a dead power plant, and there's not much else on the ground. It's going to be up to these sold off buildings spawning Peacekeepers to keep this allied player in the game, and it's actually kind of working because the cryocopters haven't been dealt with. There were 3, but now there's 2, and there may soon only be 1, but the last bullfrog gets frozen. Another peacekeeper coming out from the grave of a building to get a kill here and there. The block comes in, and the IFV shows up just in time, lays waste to almost everything. It's down to the wire, but the bullfrogs get the kill that counts. The cryocopter goes down, and Baskin pushes forward. The heroic defense just isn't heroic enough. The airfield out on the water, safe for now, but the economy has been totally trashed. A line 95 with less than 1,800 bucks in the bank needs to cut his spending, or he won't have any cryocopters to play with, and he says, I can do it with just IFVs. Meanwhile, on the other side of the map, it's going to be the laser lock. As the super reactor goes down, the walls get brought down with it, and the terror drone is not activated. Baskin doesn't realize he has that free unit at his disposal, and he's trying desperately to pull something together. Hammer tanks walking their way slowly, one after the other across the map, as his entire main base gets laid waste, and the javelins moving on. They may have enough damage to actually kill off this hammer tank. Going heroic wasn't enough, as the hammer tank gets the crush, closes the distance, and manages to get the kill that counts. Double IFV with repairs and heroic status. That garage doing work, but the War Factory doing even more work. An extremely scrappy game coming out from a Line 95 and Baskin, showing us that how you start in 2010 doesn't have to be how you play the game in 2024 or even 2025, as Baskin expands out onto the water, suffers from low power mode, and I guess no MCV, as he has been just trying to play with the units that he's already got out on the field. Very low army supply from both players. Terror drone getting the double lockdown on the IFV. Eventually the IFV will be able to turn around and get the kill on the terror drone, giving more and more time for this hammer tank to try and kill off the last harvester. But that garage is a menace. The Soviet player has no easy way to deal with the garage, and the IFVs hunting down those terror drones, hunting down the bullfrogs, as the hammer tank continues to just work away at this allied base. Heroic status is good, and I think the gun does quite a bit more damage than the leech beam. We'll see if he can make the micro magic happen, as this one multi-gunner IFV gets engaged on. Heroic status heal is good. The garage is better, as 2 IFVs plus a peacekeeper come in with the Riptide to try and get the kill on the hammer tank. Is the control perfect enough? Barely. It might be. Switches to the leech beam, and the hammer tank will survive with no IFVs and no peacekeeper. The DPS drops off, and this Riptide just doesn't have the damage to deal with the hammer tank, and the leech beam trying to out DPS that heal from the War Factory as the Guardian tank steps out. But this is a heroic hammer with leech, with the better range. He may be able to just lock down this Guardian tank and make it completely null and void. The Riptide is still ripping through these Riptide, or through the bullfrogs, as the terror drone's forced to reposition. The Riptide gets locked down, and the terror drone doesn't go for the infect. He goes for nothing, as both terror drones come to nothing, and the heroic hammer tank is strong enough to knock down the Guardian. The triple bomb from the Vindicator, not enough to kill the hammer. The heal is too much. The Riptide is outclassed and outgunned, but with the heals from the garage, the Riptide can stay alive while the Vindicator refuels and rearms. Nothing left for both players. Barely any cash, barely anything, as Baskin has tons of money, but low power mode and only a single production structure, as a Line 95 taps out. The sickle was too much. The Vindicator's not enough to kill off the heroic hammer, and not often does it come down to just one unit, but the micro was perfect from Baskin, aka Fedot 1212, as a Line 95 fights it out to the bitter end, but it's just not enough. And that sends us once again into the future. We're on to Infinity Isle, but it is not a Soviet mirror anymore. Playing the orange, playing the Soviets. This is Baskin. Meanwhile, on the left side, playing the Allies, going airfield first. It's Zanpact 099. Zanpacto. Good old Zan. What an easier to say name Zan is. As Baskin finds himself once again against an allied player. Probably not going to be going for an airfield rush. Probably not going to go for Kirovs. But maybe we'll see another heroic hammer tank doing an intense dance. The bomb split's not coming out. So Zan not going to be sniping these conscripts one by one. Sometimes with the bombs you can get the conscripts to line up for you when they go single file somewhere, and the bombs will drop and the spacing will sort of do the work for you. But in this case, the splash damage, I think getting 2 for 1 there, as some of these conscripts will be individually bombed out by Zan. 3 Vindicators out on the field, and this is a double barracks constant conscript push as they are parading across the map and tying up these Vindicators. Fortunately for Baskin, he did also grab the oil derrick right at the beginning, that early engineer, managing to secure the oil derrick and get that additional income for him. So he does have a little bit of a 500 credit per minute lead over his opponent, but I'm sure that will shrink down as the game progresses. Or maybe it'll grow as a third refinery is getting added on for Baskin. Riptide coming to the front line, and the airfield down below half health. Normally, I feel like it doesn't quite get that low, but this is just so many conscripts, and they're still double pumping across the map. Baskin down below 1,000 credits in the bank, hoping that he can keep up the pressure, and he might actually get it. It's going to be close with the conscript in the building. He gets the airfield as the rebuild finishes just in time, and the Vindicators have a new home, but that is actually a surprising reset of the allied player by Baskin. So he was able to deploy a naval yard on the bottom as well, but he was able to get the snipe on that airfield. It would have been a lot more effective if his opponent didn't have the additional airfield ready right away. If he had gotten any of the Vindicators on the deck, that would have been fantastic for Baskin. But even so, getting the snipe on that airfield is still nice. Double reactor means that there is no reset to the tech or the build of Baskin just by the snipe of one single reactor. We are once again seeing a different build being busted out here from Baskin. And these 2024 games, they are all within a month of each other. One was in July and 2 are in August. So unlike the other games where we're jumping a year in between or sometimes a little bit more, we have got ourselves a couple of games from 2024, so quite close together. Bullfrog now coming out from the naval yard. 5th refinery up and running. It's actually only the 4th refinery because he doesn't have the one backwards out on the water. But the reactor does get sniped just in time. A fresh reactor finishes, and I imagine a super reactor will be the follow-up, as Baskin not necessarily looking to build a whole lot that a reactor is required for, but he would like to get a war factory at some point, so I imagine that will also be soon on the list. Super reactor finishing up down there on the water, and then I'm gonna guess it has to be a war factory as the next structure for Baskin. Zan, on the other hand, still hasn't finished that 3rd refinery. I thought a 3rd refinery either out on the water or here on the high ground would have finished up sooner or later for Zan, but so far it has yet to emerge. A couple of Riptides going to be coming on back. Definitely a building queued up, and it could be a refinery there on to the high ground. Maybe a couple of javelins packed along in these riptides. There are 5 javelins out roaming around on the map, so there's definitely the possibility. Stingray manages to get one of the riptides and damages the other 2 quite heavily, so if there was an airfield, a couple of Twin Blades could clean them off very easily. And Peacekeepers managed to make it pretty deep behind enemy lines as they find an empty building and they find a weak power plant planted right next to it, and the reactor will get killed off. The Vindicators come in, they get the kill on the Stingray, but one Vindicator will pay for it with its life. One Apollo on the deck as well. And the Peacekeepers managed to kill the Conscript also. The reactor now having to be rebuilt before anything else comes out from the Soviet player. Stingray pokes forward, Stingray goes down. He decided that, oh, actually, I should just use the Stingray to get as many kills as I can because it's not going to escape. However, that decision was made a little bit too late in the process. Cryoshot going to be coming down, but fortunately for Baskin, he is paying attention and gets the gun! Manages to steal something from the jaws of defeat here as that hammer tank got the last tick of damage onto his buddy that the Vindicators would have killed anyways. And as a result, he gets himself a second gun. Vindicators come through. They get the snipe on that Conscript. Akula Sub is out. He can start working away on killing that seaport, but the Naval Yard is not that much consequence for Zan, who has Tier 2, who has the high ground war factory as well as the high ground refinery. So yeah, he sells off the Naval Yard immediately. No big issues there, as the super reactor down on the water may be exposed as the game goes forward. Tesla coil onto the front line. Both players chilling out just a little bit. Adaptive armor means that not much damage is taken by that harvester, and Baskin puts it right back to work immediately. Sometimes players, either the game doesn't quite receive the order to get back to work for the harvester because, you know, I think it has to wait for the animation to finish, or a player will sometimes forget that they set that harvester into armor mode if something else is happening on the map. Twin Blade gets sniped. The Apollo's not contested at all. Those bullfrogs nowhere close enough in range to save that Twin Blade, so the Apollos get the kill and head back to refuel and rearm. Sniping all of those reactors ends up paying off because he has to build another one as Baskin barely comes online with an extra 50 units of power ready to go. That's so annoying because he had 2 reactors in the main base and they got sniped earlier on, so it did actually cause a little bit of a delay there, forcing the rebuild of a second reactor there on the high ground. Crusher Crane is now online. 2 Vindicators come in, dropping all of the bombs, so no split, no, like, you know, one Vindicator bombs out the refinery and the other Vindicator drops 1 bomb and then drops the other 2 on the refinery just to maximize the damage. All 6 bombs go into the frozen harvester. Crusher Crane on the low ground, which means the repairs will not be here near the aircraft or near the frontline fight where these hammer tanks are going. No Athena cannons, no V4s, so this is going to be a pure tank fight. Twin Blades would love to get in on this fight. Bullfrogs will be able to snipe one of the Vindicators, but the rest of the fight is going to be on the ground as the Laser Painter is going to be forcing the hammer tanks back, and they were hoping to pick up a couple of more guns than they did. Instead, they just picked up some chipped health bars as one of them is very low. Finally, one gun does get claimed. The superior range of the Leech Beam is one of the advantages that the hammer tanks have over the Guardians, but of course the Guardians have the war factory right there on the front line to provide those repairs for them. So any attack by those hammer tanks can easily be healed up by this one flak trooper getting sent over the edge and will tumble down as the Apollos shred him to bits. 5th refinery finally coming online for Baskin. 5 minutes after I miscounted the refinery numbers and called a 5th refinery, we have the actual 5th refinery. And at this point, I feel like Baskin is going to need something, either Twin Blades, that don't get sniped by Apollos, or V4s, especially now that the Athena cannons are out on the map. 2 of them are here, which means the Aegis Shield and the Athena cannon attacks will give a huge advantage to Zan in the coming engagements. Hammer tanks step forward, they see the Athena cannons, and they're going to have some kind of plan to deal with them. Cryo Shot is going to be firing off. Aegis Shield gets popped, and a couple of hammer tanks just driving through the laser, caught between a hot and a cold place as another hammer tank gets popped, chipped away at immediately as those early fights go the way of the allied player. V4 steps forward. Satellite drop, I think, called in on that refinery, knocking down some of its health bar, and it's going to be into a barracks. Flak troopers, Tesla troopers, maybe a Natasha, or just a bunch of conscripts to mix in with the army and provide some additional targets. Tesla coil goes down. V4s sending out a couple of rockets. They will delay perhaps some of these units from getting to the front line, but it's going to be the Aegis Shield popped. Once again, those hammer tanks neutered away from this army, not allowed to engage in the fight, but the Guardian tanks step forward, and it's going to be a Kirov onto the front line. Sometimes this can be the battering ram that breaks down the enemy army. The Athena cannons and the Guardians doing a fantastic job of chipping away at that hammer tank army. With 4 Athena cannons, you have insane damage output, but you don't have much that shoots up. A couple of jabs mixed into the army, 1 jab to be precise, is not going to be enough to stop that Kirov. And a couple of these hammer tanks are also very low on HP. IFV is good, but 1 IFV is not going to be enough. Flak troopers step forward. Flak troopers go down. Once again, something called in on that refinery, and the Kirov steps on forward. If this Kirov just gets sent forward by itself, then perhaps not much will come of it. Hammer tanks now going to be following up. Apollos are going to be chasing the Kirov as well, and the Kirov isn't going for structures, it's going for units, so it won't get any bombs. It drove far enough to get either power plants and MCV damage or damage onto the war factory, but Baskin goes for none of them. He might get caught by the cryo shot on the retreat. It isn't needed as the hammer tank goes down just to the fire of the IFVs. And now the shoe is on the other foot. The Kirov goes down. The Bullfrog's going to be able to snipe the Apollos nice and easy, waiting for their death from above. And the Dreadnought out on the water finds its target, shot after shot landing on the buildings of the Allied base, and it will be an airfield going down as the Allied player forced into this engagement, but he has so much firepower. He may not have a lot of health bars, but he's got a lot of jabs. He's got a lot of targets for the Soviet player to engage with, but everything gets shredded before the front line can even crash. It's only the terror drone that's going to be getting a kill for the Soviet player. V4 rocket is a total miss as the jabs and the Guardians cut through the front line. The friendly fire from the Athena doing as much as any of the Soviet units. Double barracks just to delay. This is buying time for Baskin. His Dreadnought to cut through the rest of the base. Fully heroic and blasting out rockets one after the other. It's almost a base race, but one player can't go on land and one player can't go on water as the airfield is down. The Athena cannons have limited range. They're locked into the middle of the map as unit after unit falls. Building after building gets eliminated. The barracks deploys a couple of bears, but what good are they going to be as the Athena cannons have their choice of targets? And a couple of roars do get off, but the bear goes down before getting more than a single target. As the power plant goes down on the water, so do the super reactor, the refinery, and the naval yard. The rebuild options are disappearing for both players, but they are looking for the sweet spot where the Dreadnought cannot reach, where the Guardians and the Athenas cannot find. It's going to be into the Riptides. 4 Riptides produced, and the Akula sub is too late to the party. He can't fire off the Ultra Torpedoes. He can get 1 kill on these Riptides. A second will go down, and the third is heroic. The heal may be enough for that Riptide, but the second Dreadnought has found its targets. The high ground is laid waste as the Allied player steps out onto the other side of the map. On land, it is the Allies to command, but on sea, it is the Soviets who are free. Guardian tank stepping forward. The refinery, one of the few structures left on land for the Soviet player, and I would love if Zan actually captured both of the oil derricks. 15 minutes into the game, finally claims both oil derricks, and it's a rush between heroic units. Will the Riptide kill the Dreadnought, or will the Stingray and the Akula get the save? No! The Dreadnought goes down. The Tier 3 has been eliminated, and the MCV is packed all the way out on the edge of the map. Satellite drop coming in. No engineer heading to the other side of the map. Zanpact needs to wait, I guess, for the oil derrick to claim enough cash to rebuild a refinery. Both of the Dreadnoughts have gone down. Stingrays, the unit of choice for Baskin, and he once again finds himself in one of these scrappy games with not much left on either side. The Allied player has the better army, but no way to go out onto the water to actually use it. The naval yard sold off the ore refinery will get some cash back for the Soviet player. And actually, if you get cash back on a harvester that goes into a crusher crane, I'm not actually sure how much total you get, but it's $10.50 for the harvester. Maybe it's $2.50 for the cash back. Okay, no cash back. But he gets a free terror drone out of the deal, so you can either crush down the terror drone as well, get a little bit of extra money as well, or you can use the terror drone out on the battlefield. Super Reactor and Battle Lab both being established by the Soviet player. $4,000 in the bank, ticking below that now as the oil derrick needs to be captured or killed by the Allied player, and it is going to be a capture. It is going to be the oil derrick income that is sought after by Zan. Baskin, for 15 years, bringing us entertaining games in Red Alert 3. I've never heard of this player. I'm glad that he chose to email over some replays, and we are getting to see a full 10 or 15 years of games on display. The rebuild of the power plant as the double oil derrick economy is what is keeping Zan in this game. The fight of the better army doesn't matter if you can't stop the terror drone. And I think this is going to force a self-kill of the Athena cannon. What are you doing? Kill it, kill it, kill it, kill it. Don't let that terror drone escape. You got to do something. The Peacekeeper is here. And okay, the terror drone not given another command. The Peacekeeper will get that kill. Both players nearly losing an opportunity. Well, Baskin definitely lost an opportunity to do something effective with that terror drone. And this is the safe move. The better move is here, but the safer move is here. Completely out of range of the Athena cannons, and now things are starting to cook for Zan. He has got a huge advantage in terms of ground army and in terms of economy. 2 oil derricks plus a refinery. His economy is going to be screaming fast compared to the Soviet player who has a... No! Oh, no! Zan, he notices, he gets it back to work. That was almost disaster for the Allied player who should have had a better economy, but whose harvester bugged out on spawn. The Athena cannons may or may not... I don't know what just got crushed there. May or may not be able to reach the harvester as it transitions on and off of the ore node. I'm not sure if a heroic Athena cannon can reach that spot or not. And there may be a little bit of an angle there. Guardian tanks on Overwatch. They're just keeping an eye on the Soviet side of the map. The Soviet player really can't go for anything on land. I guess you go airfield at this point, but air units are relatively easy to stop, and the Dreadnought is out. Baskin had just enough cash, and now do you go for the main base, or do you try to go for the easier targets? The oil derricks exposed and ticking away income every few seconds for the Allied player. Either one is an option. As the Dreadnought steps forward, nothing else queued on that naval yard. The income is so low for both players, and it will be the Dreadnought targeting the oil derrick. Down to 1 oil derrick and 1 refinery is Zan. Tier 3 on the MCV, and the airfield is now out. But the problem, of course, is that 1 Vindicator is not going to kill this base quickly at all. Airfield is the response. Baskin will have the opportunity to go Twin Blades, will have the opportunity to go MiGs, and of course there isn't an easy way to deal with the IFVs, but if that Dreadnought had fired a couple of rockets at this army, he might have been able to thin out those IFV numbers. And of course you can eventually get another Dreadnought out. It just will take a long, long time. Heroic Athena Cannon, no Aegis Shield popped, but the Dreadnought does not have the damage. The shrink down, man, the range on the Athena Cannon is crazy. But the shrink ray coming out, basically reducing the effectiveness of that Dreadnought by 50%. It is far less effective when it is shrunk down. It has such reduced range. And the Stingray will be able to dodge and weave. Will he be able to snipe anything, though? He will distract. He will distract the cryocopters for just a moment. But without being able to deal with those cryocopters, it is tough to do anything with this Dreadnought. Bullfrogs moving forward. 1-2 Bullfrogs do get frozen. The third Bullfrog may be frozen as well. He just doesn't have the damage output. And with no MiGs, it's going to be an easy cleanup for the Athena Cannon, who can poke down these Bullfrogs one after the other. And the Dreadnought will then be left all alone, cold, and on the bottom of the ocean. The Athena Cannon finally landing the shot that she was looking for, sinks the Dreadnought, and claims another victory for the allied player. Satellite drop comes in. It kills the Harvester, but not the refinery, as the 1 Bullfrog is, I think, a little too far out for that Athena Cannon. It'll be the Vindicator that comes in for the kill. Cash back puts a little bit of money back into the pocket of Baskin, but it is looking dire after a very entertaining 22-minute game on Infinity Isle. This one may have to be called for the allied player. The last cash boost, the last cash infusion of more Bullfrogs. I feel like you have to go MiGs at this point. But the Bullfrog does get completed, maybe 1 or 2 Bullfrogs on the ground, and then MiGs after that, just to deal with those aircraft. Cryocopters stepping forward. As long as they are under the protection of the IFVs, they should be fine. But nope, they go immediately out over the water, just going a little bit blind into the naval forces of Baskin. He will find the kill. He doesn't have much hope for the rest of the game, but he will find 1 kill on a cryocopter. Double refinery now online. Free trade upgrade as well means that there is a cash bonus with every load of ore from Zan. And as it turns out, land beats water. And in this case, Allies beat Soviets. The extended game is coming down to the extended economy of these players. MCV on the high ground. Twin Blades looking for an angle. I guess hope springs eternal, but it would be a crazy comeback against a 3 refinery oil derrick allied player versus a half refinery of the Soviets. Double cryocopter coming in, the freeze of the Cryogeddon on top of the airfield as well. The refinery is one of the primary targets, and the airfield is the other. Harvester doesn't do you much good with no refinery. Of course, the Crusher Crane and the Naval Yard are still here, but with no MiGs, there isn't much hope. The Bullfrogs could try to come home after all of this, and maybe they will, but there isn't going to be much of a home for them to come back to. Flak Cannon might finish in time. It might not even finish in time. as it is moments away from finishing, as the cryocopters have already started the freezing process, and they are pretty healthy boys as the flak cannon gets frozen down. The twin blades go for the kill, and the Vindicator has, I think, a bomb left for the flak. Crusher Crane, the next target of the freeze, locking it down, will grind its gears to a stop and cancel the flak cannon all in one. The twin blade, the hope of the Soviet, but it just won't be enough as Baskin forced to tap out, and Zan will take the game here on Infinity Isle. Once again, Baskin bringing the entertaining matches, but not quite able to get the win in the extended fight. And now, for the last time in this video, we're back on Infinity Isle. And unlike some of the previous games where we're jumping ahead months or years in the timeline, this game is just a couple of hours after the previous one. Playing the yellow, playing the Empire, it's Hammerblade. Another player that I have seen around the place, but I'm not sure the condition of his play at the point of this game. And meanwhile, a returning Soviet player, this is Baskin. Going back and forth on these games. You win some, you lose some. You go War Factory before Refinery, before Second Refinery on some games. You try a Tesla push, and then you also do some pretty standard, normal stuff. SVE on Infinity Isle, something we've seen a lot, but not quite as much as matchups featuring the Allies. So we might end up in another long-range duel like we did in that last one. It might turn into a scrappy go to the edges of the map game, and in that case, the Empire may have the advantage. Oil derricks get grabbed by both players. Burst drones coming in. They will be able to detonate on top of the sickle, and the dojo core getting a couple of crushes, but as soon as the sickle shows up, then suddenly they don't have quite as much of an effect on the game. So instead, it'll be the dojo to block off the refinery location. Terror drone also out onto the map. The sickle, the terror drone, and the conscripts making short work of the remaining Empire units. Molotov cocktails coming out as well, and we don't have the fast third refinery from our Empire friend, but we do have the first Tengu out on the map as the replay freezes in time, and then eventually wakes up and allows us to step on forward into the game. Flak Trooper inside the walls of the refineries. Again, it's cool to see Baskin's strategies and skill level change over time. And in this case, Hammerblade making the right call of going for the non-walled in Harvester, getting the kill on the Flak Trooper. And if you're going to lose the Tengu, you might as well take down the Flak Trooper and have the slim possibility of escaping as well. You can still transform, you can still go wide and escape. We'll see if the conscripts are able to get the kill here. But when you get trapped with the Tengu on the inside of the walls with a Flak Trooper switched into that mine mode, it is just lights out for both of you. Sickle will go for the flea jump, but a good spot to stop your ore collector is right there in the middle, and the terror drone will lose the opportunity to jump inside of that harvester as the walls come up and the Tengus go for the transform. The second harvester not finding the perfect position to stop, and so the sickle will be able to jump inside with that harvester. Triple guns will make short work of the sickle, and the Tengus will make short work of the outside sickle as well. Meanwhile, on the other side of the map, the Harvester is back to work, and the Super Reactor is on the way up on the high ground. Third Refinery will eventually land for the Empire player, maybe a little bit behind in terms of total resources gathered and in terms of income per minute, but he'll be catching up soon enough. Oh, no magnetic mines, or yes, magnetic mines, I guess, for that Flak Trooper. But the other flak trooper has already been cleared out, so that harvester is going to have to go into adaptive armor mode. This time, the triple guns are on the side of the sickles, and it is going to be multi-pronged harass here coming in from the Empire player. Bullfrog tags this Tengu. It doesn't transform in time, but its body will crash down and take out 2 wall segments as well. 2 Tengus at least going down, and the third escapes across the middle of the map, as it's going to be walls coming up to buy some time against any encroaching armies of the Soviet player. Airfield comes up. Finally, the Tier 2 units will begin to flow as the super reactor is online and the Soviet player is ready for the next stage of the game. Well, maybe not if he doesn't have his harvesters back online. 1 harvester down to about half HP. 1 Tengu goes for the harass, and the harvester will be set into that adaptive armor mode. Twin Blades, now an option for Baskin. Chopper VXs already out on the map. They'll get the scout, and they'll confirm the timing of that airfield. May even be able to pick off this oil derrick on the high ground. Good night to the oil derrick, as 2 Chopper VXs were not contested, although they were a little lazy on the retreat. They did not pull back immediately, and so one of them trades his life. Couple of tank busters. Tsunami tank also coming out. Walls can sometimes force players to go for Tier 3 a little bit quicker than they otherwise would have. If you're directly engaging your opponent and your armies are trading out, sometimes you don't have the rush for Tier 3 as if there is a bunch of walls. But in this case, it is just a single line of walls. The sickles choose not to jump. They could have gone for this flea jump a little while ago, and instead they wait a couple of seconds. They get blocked out by those walls. Chopper VX is now going to be showing up. No bullfrogs, no MiGs in the mix, as this Soviet army is going to get crushed by the air superiority of the Empire. Finally, the bullfrogs show up as a couple of hammer tanks and a sickle go down. There's the transform, and the tank busters hiding away in their spider holes won't have much more to do with this fight. Hammer tanks escape. Twin Blades now out on the field. MCV repositioning. Looks like he's going for the low ground naval yard, plus perhaps the refinery way down there. Defender VX now out on the field. Harassment coming back to the other side of the map, but it's a single terror drone that gets sniped by the Tengus of Hammerblade. Fresh wall segments coming up. Hammerblade trying to make safe his front door once again. No rush to Tier 3 for our Soviet player. Instead, it is going to be this reliance on the Tier 2 combo. Twin Blade Bullfrog is powerful. Hammer tanks are powerful. But can you bust through the wall? Or is it going to be up to the Dreadnoughts, as we saw Baskin go for versus Zan in the last Infinity Isle match? It might be the Dreadnoughts that find the damage onto the main base of Hammerblade. Fresh Defender Corps out there next to the refinery. 2 Tengus going for the harass. They're not dropping down just yet, and this is giving lots of time and opportunity. Hammer tank is going to get base dropped into Hammerblade's base, and the MiG will escape. The Twin Blade should be able to escape, but the Hammer tank will not escape. Some lost mining time and a little bit of damage on to the point defense drones, but not much more than that. You better have a better plan. Where are the Twin Blades? This is a prime opportunity for the Twin Blades to get some damage done. The Tengus are not nearby. In fact, nothing is nearby for these tsunami tanks that are just working away on this ore collector. It's going to be leech beams from the high ground, but distracted by an attack elsewhere on the map. It's going to be the Terror drone that gets the first bit of damage done and gets wiped out by the Stingray, but no, it's still working away at that tsunami tank. The Tesla overcharge from the Stingray doesn't have an effect on friendly units, and it seems that the tsunami tank got the second infect of that Terror drone just in time as the damage ticked over from the terror drone. And it's going to be satellites dropped, but they miss the harvester. They hit the refinery, and the naval yard comes out from Hammerblade. No fifth refinery so far from Baskin. He is not going for that other water expansion. And no rebuild on the harvester just yet either. Instead, Baskin is going to be threatening the front door. I wouldn't be too worried about the front door if I'm Hammerblade. The combination of tsunamis, choppers, tangus, and tank busters should be able to deal with this army. Of course, if the bullfrogs are handled well, then the chopper VXs won't really do anything. It'll be up to the rest of the units and, you know, no chopper VXs. And then in that case, maybe the hammer tanks can get the crush and maybe they can win the fight versus the tsunami tanks. But the Empire player should be able to handle the attack without too much trouble. Stingray gets the kill on the harvester, getting a little bit of damage onto the ore refinery as well. Harvester rebuild starts there, and the tsunami tank gets the kill on the Stingray. But no rebuild on the harvester on the water. So the 4 refinery economy is really a 3 harvester economy from Baskin. Meanwhile, in the middle of the map, nothing happens. Something almost happens, but it was just the wall segments that got knocked down. And perhaps the Tangus will find an angle into the main base of Baskin. The Chopper VXs as well. With no MiGs, there isn't much to oppose them here. It's going to be 4 Bullfrogs making the long walk home. But fortunately, these Strikers have found nothing because they just sat around. Even though they were in range of the Harvester, they were in range of the refinery, even the power plant could have been targeted. Instead, nothing went down because nothing was targeted. The refinery will be getting shut down by a single tsunami tank now, and maybe the harvester was rebuilt, but it's dead now as this entire refinery is getting taken offline by one single tsunami tank. From the high ground, the leech beam, it's going to be a race of the health bars, but that's going to be a double vet tsunami tank who activates the nano deflectors and gets out of there. Would have been a great opportunity to jump back in with the Strikers. They could have cleaned up the harvester, the refinery, maybe the power plant as well, as everything, including the bullfrogs, got pulled to the high ground away from this opened, exposed area and sent on the attack of that tsunami tank. Bullfrogs can't do much, but they can do something here on the front line. A Tesla Trooper and a Bear. There's the split. Can the Hammer Tanks get the crush? Everything goes underground, so they don't even need to. And this is a lot of Hammer Tanks and no Chopper VXs in the sky. Everything that's in the sky is off to the south, out over the water, doing nothing, as Hammerblade is missing a crucial piece of his army and handing away gun after gun. But the Tank Busters, the one thing the Hammer Tanks can't deal with easily, they get a couple of kills right there at the end. Once again, this base completely exposed. 4 bullfrogs in the main section, in the middle of the map, and the Strikers, they have free reign. They can target anything, the War Factory, the refinery, and they'll go for the War Factory. It's worth even sacrificing a couple of them just to get the kill. The Bullfrogs are coming back. They will be body blocked by those Tangus, and goodbye to the War Factory. The refinery can be the next target as well. Don't even stop for the Harvester, because that refinery can be taken offline quite easily. The attack is restarting. A lot of tank busters are here. Are there bears or something on the back end? It's a Dreadnought once again making its way to the battlefield. It's going to be Baskin going for the long-range artillery, as in the middle of the map, it's the Hammer Tank stepping forward. All of the bears have nothing to roar at as everything goes underground. The tanks get eaten up by the hammers, and it's Hammerblade's front line that gets crushed. The Dreadnought working away at the back line, and every single tank buster under the ground useless, as they are unable to do anything versus these bears. They try popping up, but they just go down, and it's all or nothing. So the roar comes out, and the crush comes in as the hammer tanks crush Hammerblade right on the front line. It's a tier 3 Mecha Bay, but without anything coming out of it, it's a useless as a paperweight. King Oni steps out. Bullfrogs are too far back. Tengus go for the transform. This is the opportunity to turn things around. The MCV has already gone down, and it bought time, but did it buy enough? The Dreadnought out on the water, still poking away at the base, firing shot after shot, finds one refinery, looking for another. A second King Oni steps out. Nanotech mainframe could be targeted. If the War Factory goes down, it would be a full tech reset, and it would be pretty much the end of the Empire player, who can only rebuild the MCV out here on the water. King Oni locked in place. Dreadnought caught and killed. Last round of rockets fires off. Is it a tier 3 ender? It is. Right as the Wave Force artillery steps out, the terror drone goes down, and the King Oni makes a run for it, striking down the heroic hammer tank, bearing the gun of the Empire, and instead the hammer tanks will reign supreme. The King Onis go down, but so do the Dreadnoughts. The Bullfrogs are so far back. There's the transform of the Tengus. Every hammer tank that goes down is so important as the rank up happens on the Strikers. Those red missiles flying furiously fast as they take down hammer tank after hammer tank, bullfrog after bullfrog, cut down by the Empire player. And Baskin loses his entire frontline army. No MiGs. The guy doesn't like MiGs. He believes in the Bullfrog, and certainly they are powerful. But a couple of MiGs mixed into the army would have helped him hunt down those targets. Instead, the MiGs go down. They fly directly over heroic Chopper VXs, 3 of them in formation, ready to take down anything in the sky. The MCV gets rebuilt. The refinery's coming back online. The Mecha Bay, thousands and thousands of credits invested into getting that up to tier 3, and now it all has to be done again. It'll take a couple of minutes. If you can buy the time, the Nanotech mainframe is still here. Dojo now being deployed. The hammer tanks and the bullfrogs being cut down in the previous fight means that there's only one unit on the front line here. A MiG just getting shot up, and now it'll get shut down as it goes down to the Defender Corps on the ground. Power plants, okay, you might as well get something for your troubles. Hammerblade can, I think, afford to lose 1, and maybe that's it. Tier 2, not quite done. Tank Busters getting eliminated 1 by 1. Tier 2 finishes up. Tsunami tanks and Chopper VXs are back on the menu as Baskin is looking for the angle to end. No naval yard down on the water. The battle lab remains. And it's a Nagasana cruiser as it is going to be an angle down in the south. The MCV is open and exposed. The Bullfrogs being kept away by the Tengus, and commit in. The Chopper VXs do so much damage. They can kill an MCV in almost no time flat. 3 of them fully heroic, and the Tengus are now on the wrong side. 1 Chopper VX needs to transform. It's a little bit late, but it's fast enough to save it. The low health Chopper gets the transform, and the Tengus go for the kill on the MiG. The MCV goes down, and the Soviet player has a Kirov snuck in from somewhere else as the Kirov finds the kill on the naval yard, on the refinery, but not on the MCV. A couple of extra bombs will do some critical damage. The Tengu's going down so incredibly low. The Kirov survives, barely any HP, chasing the MCV. The slowest chase you've ever seen in your life, but just with 2 or 3 HP remaining, it was enough for the Kirov to survive the day. flaming but still flying as every Tengu goes down to the bullfrogs. The power plant gets sold off. No heroic rank up for you. You'll have to get it by killing that MCV. The fresh Tengu is right on the front line, flying in not a moment too late as he clips the wing of that Kirov and saves Hammerblade from a watery grave. Hammer tanks backing up away from the tank busters. Bears coming in. Tank busters are going to have to go underground if they hope to survive. The crush doesn't come in. They're in their spider holes. And once again, this refinery is on the front line, is under threat. Nearly 20 minutes into the game, and Hammerblade still has control of his oil derrick. Bullfrogs step too far forward. They pay the price, and the tank buster is going to be able to get some free shots on these hammer tanks. One of them is heroic. He'll heal back up as he grinds down this tsunami tank. Chopper VX is showing up. The bullfrogs have been eliminated, which means the skies are free and clear. Hero hammer tank goes down as Hammerblade finds the kills one after the other, but it's a change of pace. The MiGs fly in, but only to get shot down one after the other. 3 eliminated in one fell swoop as the tsunami tank saves the tank busters under the ground, and the Chopper VXs get forgotten in the middle of the map. A refinery stolen from your opponent does double damage. It feeds you and it damages them. 2 for 1, but it's an MCV rebuild from both players. A few minutes apart, but they lose it both. Satellite comes in. That Tier 3 satellite drop claims the nanotech mainframe, claims the dojo as well, and that's a Tier 2 mecha bay. No Wave Force artillery, no King Oni. The artillery advantage remains in the hands of the Soviets. No Shogun battleships either. Will the V4s actually come out onto the map? For now, it's just the APOC tanks here on the front line. Harder to shut down, bigger bullet sponges as one MiG shows up to the front line as well. Tengus go for the transform. They're going to be able to jump on both of the bullfrogs, and they may be able to cut down those bears as well to free up the units. 1, 2 Chopper VXs, but no, the second gets crushed along with the tsunami tanks, so it's down to the MiG to clear the skies. The APOC tank's going low on HP, and the mecha base survives for now. The MiGs get cleared out, but the choppers are in the wrong mode. They transform just in time, and he goes heroic, getting the instant rank up off of the double vet APOC tank. Moments from victory. Baskin's army falls apart. If the mecha bay goes down, the ground army is stopped. But Baskin is unable to clinch it, and Hammerblade gets the critical kill just in time. V4's ready moments after the fight ends, and now they're being sent to their doom for an unknown reason to give veterancy to these brave tank busters fighting virtually defenseless opponents. The V4s go down, and that's a double vet, a single vet, and a heroic tank buster all on the front line. Baskin fighting furiously, but things have gotten out of hand. Hammerblade up 10 grand in total resources gathered, but with more and more harvesters and refineries going offline, I feel like Baskin's economy is about to collapse in on itself. Nearly depleted. MCV back down to the low ground. MiGs are here. Tengus will have to guard them away, but Chopper VXs never underestimate how much damage they do to buildings, especially the MCV, which gets packed up, and you can trade a couple of units if you get the kill on the MCV, because that's 5 grand that has to be spent rebuilding it, and a minute on the build queue. Caught up with the Naval Yard or with the War Factory, either one doing nothing but rebuilding an MCV. The Kirov manages to escape. Naginatana cruiser is going to stab its way into the ore refinery. The harvester has gone down. The economy slipping once again. And finally, this refinery has been found out, it seems, as Baskin realizes that his opponent, who he thought was perhaps on 2 or 3 refineries, is actually on 4. Tengus go for the transform, maybe just in time to kill the harvester as it spawns in. The Kirov looking for its target. The ground army isn't particularly strong. The strength of Hammerblade is in these transforming units. The Tengus and the Strikers, if they find the right pace, if they find the right angle, then they will manage to get the transforms right to kill this army, no problem. Strikers find the Kirov. 1 MiG, not enough to shut this down, and the Kirov does nothing. Now it's about the hammer tanks and the bullfrogs. I don't even see bullfrogs on my screen, so the Chopper VXs can just clear out these hammer tanks at their leisure. There is nothing stopping them. Akula Sub shows up for a 1v1 fight versus a Naginata, but it's not going to be a fight that the Akula Sub can win. Good night, dear shark. He's swimming with the fishes down on the bottom of the ocean. And once again, Hammerblade stabilizing, pushing off every attack that comes at him, and the result is 5k per minute for Hammerblade, 3.5k per minute for Baskin. The economy getting rougher and rougher as we get close to depleted ore mines for both players. But what's not depleted is this one over here. 18 grand still to give. 10k still to give. The hammer tanks. If the MiGs get the kills, then maybe the hammer tanks can at least survive the Chopper VXs. But can they break the tank busters? The dance of the bears is very critical. If the hammer tanks get too close to the tank busters without the bears, the tank busters shred them, especially with a couple of King Oni's body blocking. Wave Force Artillery just makes this even more a done deal for the Empire player. The artillery advantage is massive as a couple of tsunami tanks, not even Strikers or Tengus, but a couple of tsunami tanks make their way into the main base of Baskin, creating a even worse situation out of a bad one, forcing the fire sale as Baskin will tap out and say GG for this one. And that will do it. Baskin, the player of the hour, but ends up losing the last game as well. And that is more than a decade of games for Baskin. We started all the way back in 2010 on Snowplow and ended in 2024 on Infinity Isle. The change to the player, the change to the strategies, but the maps remain the same. So a big thanks to Baskin for the replays. Thank you all very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. And this is Sybert signing out.